The fragrance of selfless love that has drawn the world into one family. The truth of an eternal message that has been revealed through every act and word. The fulfillment in service that has been taught by relentless sacrifice. The Lord's own life is indeed His message.
Sai Ram, and welcome to the latest episode in our ongoing series entitled The Message of the Lord. As you must have noticed, this month-long series is a visual presentation intended to bring you the essence of the teachings of Bhagwan Baba. At the same time, we're also trying to offer suggestions as to how we can put those precious teachings into practice. Today, we shall consider the issue of tempering worldly knowledge with spiritual considerations.
Let me start with the famous DNA molecule, which I'm sure you must have heard of. As is well known, the DNA is a molecule of life. Notice that it consists of two strands winding around each other in a helical spiral. That is why the DNA is sometimes described as a double helix. You should also note that the two helically spiraling strands are connected by what looks like steps in a staircase. You might wonder what all this has got to do with Swami's message and spirituality. That exactly is what I'm coming to. Let me start with the fact that in nature there is no such thing as a one-strand DNA. In the same way, says Swami, education is meaningless if it is confined solely to what is these days referred to as secular or worldly education.
పుస్తకములు చదవటం, అందున్నటువంటి విషయాలను ఎగ్జామినేషన్లో రాయటము, పాస్ మార్క్స్ తెప్పించుకోవటము, ఇతను పాస్ అయినాడని బిరుదును మాత్రం పొందుతున్నారు.
They just limit themselves to merely going through the text, appear for the examinations, secure a pass and claim that degree thereafter.
నిత్య సత్యమైనటువంటి విషయములను విద్య అంటే ఏమిటి అనేటువంటిది ఎవ్వరికీ తెలియటం లేదు.
The eternal truth which is contained in the process of learning is not known to anybody.
చదువులన్నీ చదివి చాలా వివేకి అయి మగిడి తన్నెరుగడు మందమతుడు.
A foolish man, though an intellectual with all the acquisition of the knowledge, does not know his true self.
ఎంత చదువు చదివి ఏ నీతి ఉన్నను హీనుని గుణంబు మానలేడు.
One may be occupying exalted position with all high knowledge and education, but he will not give up his mean mentality and attitude.
తరచి చదువు చదువ తర్కవాదమే కానీ పూర్ణ జ్ఞానం ఎప్పుడు పొందలేడు.
All his knowledge helps him to be argumentative and to differ with everybody and not to acquire the totality of knowledge.
ఇది ఆ విద్య.
Is thus education.
For education to be complete, there must be simultaneous instruction on spiritual values also, with great stress and emphasis on discipline, as well as sense and mind control.
అందులో ఈనాటి విద్యలన్నీ కూడాను కేవలము చెత్త విద్యలు.
All the education that we acquire today is rather cheap and useless.
ఈనాటి టెక్స్ట్ బుక్లు అనేటువంటివి చూస్తే ఏమాత్రం కూడా సారమైనటువంటిది లేవు అక్కడ.
The textbooks that we make use of do not have any essence.
In other words, for education to be complete, it must comprise of both secular as well as spiritual education, both strongly intertwined and together leading to character and integrity.
విద్యార్థులారా,
Students,
మీరు వేరుగా భావించకండి.
don't
విద్యార్థులైనటువంటి వారు చక్కని విద్యను అభ్యసించి ప్రపంచానికి ఈ చక్కని బోధనను అందించడానికి పూనుకోవాలి.
The students should acquire the proper knowledge, proper education and set an ideal to the rest of the society.
That is the way society would get honest administrators business managers with integrity, scientists who do not play games with nature, doctors who are focused on saving lives than on becoming rich, etc. So, now you see why I brought in the DNA. Like the DNA, education too must have two strands, secular and spiritual, with mind and sense control, character development, etc., acting like the steps connecting the two. If you keep all this in mind and look at educational establishments in most parts of the world today, you would find only one side and no steps. Now ask yourself, can such a system be called balanced education? Clearly not. Over here in Prashanti Nilayam, every year on the 11th of January, there is a gala festival called the Annual Sports and Cultural Festival, during which the various campuses of Baba's school and colleges participate.
Bend the body, mend the mind, and end the senses.
These two gymnasts touch new heights.
On 14th January, there is a prize distribution ceremony during which Baba gives away the prizes. On that occasion, Swami usually gives a discourse, and many a time Baba has, during his discourse, used a special string of 4 words. They are knowledge, skill, balance, and insight. In this context, Swami often refers to many sports events where not only knowledge but also skill is very important. Referring to motorcycle stunts, for example, Swami would say that the rider would need a good knowledge about riding bikes and also a lot of skill in handling the bike itself. However, without balance, the performer could be in trouble. So it is in life, Baba would then add. What Baba means is that mere worldly knowledge and all kinds of professional skills associated with such knowledge are by themselves not enough in life. All these must be supplemented by spiritual balance. If that balance is lacking, then the time and money spent on acquiring education would be a complete waste. It is amazing to what extent this important point is being neglected, although it is pretty obvious that such neglect has serious consequences. Once upon a time, crime meant things like theft, assault, murder, and so on. Back then, most of these crimes were committed by poor and uneducated people. Such things happen even today. However, this type of crime is relatively small compared to those committed by intelligent and highly educated people.
The fatal flaw at Enron was pride, arrogance, intolerance.
What money you guys stole from those poor grandmothers?
We can add $1 gazillion to the bottom line.
All right, that sounds fantastic.
Did you convert stock worth $66 million?
I don't know. I netted approximately $100 million.
It had taken Enron 16 years to go from about 10 billion of assets to 65 billion of assets. It took them 24 days to go bankrupt.
Corporate fraud, cybercrime and so on are among the crimes committed by highly educated people. Even the so-called 9/11 attack was engineered by educated people. That is why a leading educationist in the West once said that his university produces only clever devils. In other words, producing brilliant scientists and engineers, or even doctors who are very knowledgeable and highly skilled, is simply not enough. Society needs much more. Recall a point we made a few episodes earlier. What Professor Weisskopf is telling us, and he ought to know, is that all worldly knowledge and professional skills need to be polished with spiritual balance. Then alone would one obtain insight into the meaning and purpose of life. As someone nicely put it, the purpose of life must be to lead a life of purpose. Compassion is the best way of making life have meaning and purpose. Let us now consider one specific example of how balance helps as opposed to mere knowledge and skill, which in combination generally creates only big problems. At the present time, many passionately believe that the Internet is one of the greatest blessings of modern times. In many respects, the Internet is certainly a great boon. However, there is also such a thing as excessive use as well as misuse of even a blessing. And the case of South Korea illustrates how sometimes too much of a good thing can be a curse.
South Korea is one of the world's most wired countries. Nearly every home has high-speed broadband internet, and on nearly every street corner, a 24-hour cyber cafe. But all that has come at a cost. More and more teenagers and even young adults are addicted to online gaming. They are so obsessed, they forget about basic social relations and responsibilities. And one recent case sent shockwaves across Korean society. A jobless couple had continuously played 12-hour overnight sessions in an internet cafe, neglecting their 3-month-old baby. The husband, Kim Jae-byum, is 41 years old. His wife is 25. Last September, when they returned home from gaming overnight, they found their baby dead, shriveled from malnutrition. Born premature, she was fed milk twice a day, 3 times if her father woke up during the day. Police pictures show mold growing in her milk. In March, they were sentenced to 2 years in prison, but the judge suspended the mother Kim Yoon-jong's jail term as she's pregnant again.
In fact, internet addiction is now officially recognized in South Korea as a mental malady. Why has such a situation come about, and how did it happen? There are many reasons. To start with, driven by the intense desire to be counted as an advanced country, young people in South Korea are being forced to become extremely competitive. This is the new global frenzy, and children in many countries, India included, are constantly told if you cannot compete fiercely, you would perish. Most children find this pressure too much and seek escape channels. Apparently, young people in South Korea find that online video games offer a very good solution. Thanks to street corner internet cafes, children and students in South Korea spend hours and hours every day playing these games to forget themselves. In the process, they also ruin their physical health, besides becoming psychological wrecks. Deeply concerned, doctors and government health authorities have now come up with internet addiction centers to wean children and students out of their addiction.
Counselors say when at home, these teenagers typically use the internet for 12 to 18 hours a day. The camp helps them build emotional bonds with the real world in order to distance themselves from the virtual one.
It is nice to have rehab centers like they have for drug addicts and alcoholics. However, if one is serious about the problem, then one has to go deeper and ask how the problem arose in the first place. That exactly is where spiritual balance comes into the picture. How exactly is such a worldly thing called the internet connected with spirituality? That is the question we shall examine next. Not many may be aware that the web was an invention of scientists in the world's leading scientific laboratory called CERN, that straddles two countries, France and Switzerland. CERN scientists, who are often located in many places, wanted to be in constant touch with each other, exchange huge volumes of data, etc., and thus was born the concept of computer network. In other words, scientists figured out a way of not only interlinking computers in different places, rather like telephones are, but also exchanging information, data, pictures, offering links to common databases, etc. That, in brief, was how the web concept came into existence. Soon it went from the lab to educational establishments, and in no time at all, it was in the marketplace, allowing people to do all sorts of things across the world. And that was how the World Wide Web became a global necessity. In no time at all, the floodgates were literally opened, and everything from online shopping to online betting became possible. With all this came all sorts of undesirable things also, including, of course, undesirable video online games, which promptly got many young people totally hooked. Social networking, which everyone thinks is a great blessing, has also led to young people not only wasting a lot of time, but unnecessarily telling everyone all sorts of things about them not exactly required, we would say. That's what happens when knowledge and skill begin to dominate unchecked. You may ask, okay, but what kind of balance is needed to set matters right?
Well, let us go back to Swami's teachings. In particular, what he has to say about the purpose of life. Remember that? Swami says that life is given to us so that we make it a journey back to God. In short, from God we come, and to God we must return. Now, Swami is not asking us all to become recluses. Not at all. In fact, he wants us to be fully immersed in life, but with a God focus.
Now, if one were to spend 10 to 12 hours a day at a computer doing not work or study, but just wasting time, is it good for the body? What about the time spent? Is that not a waste? Does not Swami say, do not waste time, for time waste is life waste? What about energy? Does not Swami also say, energy is God, do not waste energy? Does not internet use consume energy? So, balance means being in the world, but retaining at the same time our sense of purpose. It is by way of stressing this that Baba sometimes tells us, hands in society, but head in the forest. A simple way of achieving this would be to not only stick to moral principles in whatever we do, but also dedicate whatever we do to God, in the full belief that our actions are being performed entirely for God's pleasure. Surely, when a kid plays video games for hours and hours, the kid is not doing so for God's pleasure, is it? What happened to the parents? Don't they understand what's happening? Why did they not intervene? What happened to teachers? Why did they not advise the students? Why, for that matter, was society allowing things to go out of hand? Well, it looks like everybody was lacking balance, which is not surprising, since how many people think of God regularly? You know, we must think of God not merely when we are in trouble, but also when things are going well for us. That is why Saint Kabir once said,
दुख में सुमिरन सब करे, सुख में करे न को। जो सुख में सुमिरन करे, दुख काहे को होय। कबीरा दुख काहे को होय।
That was beautiful, was it not? So you see, God focus is most important because in life's journey, it is like a compass. Imagine going through a dense jungle or sailing on the wide ocean without a compass. If a person did that, he or she would be totally lost. That exactly is what happens to most people today as they go through life. We become very busy chasing this and that. Do we pause for a moment and ask, why on earth am I tiring myself out in this manner? What for? What good is it going to do to me? Not many do this. They are just swept by the force of events around them and keep going in a robotic fashion. A few, however, would say that they are doing all this for the sake of money, fame and wealth. Ask them why they want money, fame, wealth, etc. They would reply, for being happy. What else, you stupid? The funny thing is that even many devotees feel that way. Why? Because they have hardly spent any time thinking deeply about what Swami has been telling us and teaching us. Remember the very first message Swami gave to humanity way back in October 1940? Surely, you know what that bhajan means, don't you? Reflecting on that for a moment every day, and tuning one's life to that message Swami gave us so long ago would be one good way of introducing balance, meaning, and purpose into our lives. Continuing on that theme, how many times have we heard Swami sing this particular bhajan?
Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam, Govindam Bhaja Mudhamate, Samprapte Sannihite Kale, Samprapte Sannihite Kale, Nahi Nahi Rachati Dukrum Karane.
We all know what that means, don't we? What is the use of all the wealth in the world when death is knocking on the door? And finally, what about this bhajan?
Bhajana bina sukha shanti nahi.
Sai bhajana bina sukha shanti nahi.
Hari bhajana bina sukha shanti nahi.
Sai bhajana bina sukha shanti nahi.
Hari nama bina ananda nahi.
Sai nama bina
Hari nama bina ananda nahi.
How many times have we heard Swami sing this bhajan? And how many times have we sung this along with him? I am sure we all know the meaning, and there is no need for me to go into it in detail. In simple language, the essence of the message is, without keeping God in mind, we would never be able to enjoy real peace and happiness. If you want to take home a lesson from this episode, I would say it could be the following. Let us finally, and once and forever, get rid of the notion that spirituality is far removed from daily life. If there is one thing we should and must learn from Bhagavan Baba, it is that spirituality must be made the very core of life by making our lives revolve around the teachings of Swami.
That is the way to introduce balance into our lives. That is the way to make our lives more meaningful and purposeful. And that is the way to real happiness. That is all we have for this episode. And I hope you liked what we offered. Please do join us again tomorrow. Jai Sai Ram.